This offseason is definitely going to be a very busy one for the New York Rangers. And of course, I expect Chris Drury, the general manager, to continue to make some win-now kind of moves. And of course, I don't think he's going to completely go out there and mortgage this team's entire future. But what I do think is obviously he's going to look to make some moves to strengthen this team right now. This team is not in a spot where they're looking to be a rebuilding kind of team or even go into a full-on kind of couple year kind of retool. They definitely seem like a team who want to get right back on track to being a Stanley Cup contender and of course want to be a team that has the ability to go on a long playoff run. And we saw this team do that a couple of the last kind of playoff runs there, making it to 2 of the previous 3 Eastern Conference Finals before this season there. And that's great and all. But if we're being honest, I don't think in those couple playoff runs there, this team was built the absolute kind of best way for the playoffs. I think physically, it was very evident that this team lacked just an overall kind of physicality level there, an energy level at moments. And I think this team definitely needed to add in some more kind of stronger, tougher players. And they did some of that, obviously, this past season there by adding in a guy like Sam Carrick to be the fourth-line center, who I think is a perfect fourth-line center to have. He can win faceoffs, he can kill penalties, bring a solid two-way game, produce here and there offensively, but not obviously going to bring a ton offensively, but can produce here and there. Just bring that overall physical play, though, that you want to have out of especially a fourth liner come playoff time. A guy who isn't going to bring, of course, a lot offensively, but can just be a solid, reliable defensive guy, but also has that physical ability. So I think that was a good move. They're bringing him in to bring some physicality in. And of course, they finally went out there and traded for JT Miller earlier in the season there to, of course, add in some more kind of toughness and is a guy who is definitely a top 6, top line caliber forward as well. So he brings it offensive talent, but also has some of that physicality, which that's great and all, but this team still needs more of it. And especially on the back end there, I think that's an area where this team absolutely is lacking some toughness, some strength, some size, and some physicality there. So I think for the playoffs, this team absolutely needs to have some more of those kind of tougher, stronger guys. And this team, like I said, has definitely lacked that, and I expect this offseason, hopefully, this team will add some more of that. And, obviously, it can't just be some tough guys because this team does need a lot more talent as well on the squad to kind of help that depth there on the front and back end there, forward and defense side of things. But I think a big area of need for this team, like I said, is to add some of that physicality in, which is an absolute must-add for this team. I think that's an absolute fact. And I do like some of this kind of core, though. The core of this team, some pieces are good. I'm not saying the entire core is great, but a guy like Vincent Trocheck, now, of course, JT Miller. You've got a guy like even a Braden Schneider in the back end there, I think can be a pretty key piece for this team potentially, especially if he can take that step in his game. Keandre, little hit and miss, a little inconsistent, that's for sure, but if he can get more consistent there, that can be a very good piece. You've always got a guy like Foxy as well, and, yes, the Banjet at center may not be the best, but him going to wing, maybe we're going to get a different kind of a player here like we saw throughout the last, month or a few weeks, especially this season there, where he was an absolute fire. If we can see more of that, because the Banjet, then he can definitely be a pretty key player for this team, although, still not be quite worth that full $8.5 million, but he can definitely be a potentially kind of somewhat valuable guy, or at least definitely more valuable than what he was doing at center. Lafreniere, if he takes that step back up in his game, he can definitely be a very key piece. Of course, like I said, you got those two centers there in Trocheck and Miller. Panarin obviously may not be the best playoff performer ever, but he still can be a key piece there. And of course, his contract will come down quite a bit there. Maybe this team does bring him back and re-sign him, but if they do, it's obviously going to be for quite a few, mil less than what he's making right now. So that's going to be a bit of a pay cut there in the future after this upcoming season as well. So you're getting either a new, maybe kind of top scorer and possibly to fill that spot, or you're getting a different guy. But my point is, this team has some good quality players on this team right now, and I think there absolutely need to be some more big moves made to really kind of try and help fix some of these kind of issues and that problems that this team does have. But I think the core, or at least some of the core, is pretty solid there. And especially having an elite goalie like Igor, I understand that contract is massive and it's coming on the books, for next season, of course. But I think having a guy like that who is that good is quite interesting, and it makes things, cap-wise, yes, a little difficult to really build out that amazing roster, but we have seen Igor Shesterkin really help fix and kind of not necessarily completely kind of fix, I guess, but, put a Band-Aid over some of those problems that this team obviously does have, in those previous playoff rounds there when, the D-core was getting worked and this team was stuck in their own end for, minute after minute after minute, getting shot after shot after shot against them. For the most part there, Igor still came through, and when he had the ability to make that stop there, unless it was a complete backdoor tap-in, he's there for the most part to at least make a good attempt on that save or to either save it, right, and save this team at moments when they're just not doing a good enough job. So basically what I'm getting at is I really do think this team isn't necessarily that far off of being a real cup contender as some fans may think. You look at the roster that this team has had over the last, 2 conference finals appearances that this team did have. Those rosters were not built the best way by any means, and they still made it quite a ways there to the conference finals where they lost both times in Game 6 to, each of the Florida teams. But my point being, that roster wasn't built the best. So if you can build it even a bit better there while still having that goalie like Igor Shesterkin in net there, you'd be having arguably a better coach in Mike Sullivan over a guy like Laviolette or Gerard Gallant. Maybe with those extra couple pieces here and there, building this roster just that little bit of a better way, come playoff time, maybe that can be the extra kind of, factor for this team to get over the hump there, make that finals, and actually possibly win that cup. I'm not saying it's likely, not saying it's going to happen, but what I am saying is I don't think this team is so far away, and it's absolutely impossible to think that this team can be a conference finals team once again next season there. I don't think it's insane to think that. Now, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe you do think I'm insane for thinking that, but I just think with the way this roster is built, having a guy like Igor there, having some of the good pieces that this team does have, if you can make a couple more of those right moves to really kind of put this team in a better spot come playoff time to build this roster a bit better of a way, I think this team can really do some damage and maybe get back on track to really being a contending team come playoff time for next season or at some point in the near future. But I just think that if this team is able to make the right moves this offseason there, and of course that's much easier said than done, but if Chris Drury can finally make the right moves there and add on a couple more good pieces to this team that just kind of need to be the finishing pieces possibly, this team definitely can, I think, get back on track to being a cup contender. When you have a guy like Igor Shesterkin in net, it's definitely possible. And we already saw him kind of carry this team along to 2 different Eastern Conference finals while already not having the best roster built around him. So I really do think adding in a guy like, let's say, Gavrikov, for example, and a third-line center, even a decent one, I'm not saying it has to be even a guy at the level of Sam Bennett, but if you add in a decent, good third-line center and a guy like Gavrikov on the back end, a true top 4 caliber, defenseman, I think that automatically, just those 2 moves alone, really makes this team a whole lot better. And that's not counting the possibility of, trading a guy like Keandre and also upgrading him potentially, or trading a guy like Kreider. They're opening up more cap space to go up there and add in a real impactful forward as well, or another good, there are so many different types of moves and kind of moves this team can make. It's about making the right ones. And of course, like I said, it's much easier said than done. But if this team can make some of the right moves, it doesn't have to be a entire roster haul now at this point there. I just think a couple moves here and there on the back end and the forward side of things, but especially that third line center spot and one more top 4 caliber guy added in the back end, and this team can really potentially get right back on track to being a conference final caliber team. Anyways, that's going to do it for today's video. If you have enjoyed, definitely don't forget to click that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content, as I do post every single day. And of course, don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on today's video. Do you agree with me in saying that this team may not be that far off of getting right back on track to being, a cup contender, or at least a team that can go on a bit of a playoff run like they've done over the last couple seasons, or at least 2 of the last few seasons? Love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'll catch you next one, and let's go Rangers.